I trusted my best friend with everything, until I found her saved photos of my husband, so I set one dinner invite that ended the friendship forever. I think my brain is still trying to pretend this is not real, because it feels too embarrassing to say out loud, like I am about to admit I got played in the most obvious way and everyone else saw it coming except me, and now I cannot unsee what I saw, and I cannot put the friendship back in the box it came in. I am Kessa. I am married to Ronan. We have been together long enough that we have that comfortable rhythm where you can hand each other a task with just a look, like he will refill the soap dispenser without me asking and I will fold his work shirts the exact way he likes because it makes the drawer close smoothly. Nothing glamorous, just normal life that feels safe. My best friend is Junie, and I know calling someone your best friend sounds like middle school, but that is what she was. She was the person who knew my passwords when we were in our early 20s. She was the person who sat with me on my apartment floor when my first job made me cry. She was the person who brought me a ridiculous amount of moving boxes when Ronan and I first moved in together. She was in my wedding photos. She was in the center of my life in that way where you stop picturing the future without them in it. Junie has always been intense, not mean, not loud, just intense, the kind of person who locks onto a thing and does it 100%. She would get into pottery and suddenly have a wheel in her living room. She would get into running and suddenly have a hydration vest and a watch and a spreadsheet. She made everything feel like a mission, and I liked that about her because I am more of a soft edges person. I do not wake up with a battle plan. I wake up and see what the day wants. Ronan got along with her too, not in a flirty way, more like he respected her competence. He works in a field where most people talk big and deliver small, and Junie is the opposite. She shows up, she organizes, she remembers details, she can talk to anybody without being awkward. Ronan used to joke that if Junie ever started a small country it would immediately have excellent public transportation. If you are reading this already thinking, okay, she is going to admit Junie had a crush on your husband the whole time, I swear I did not see it that way, and even now I am not sure it was a crush in the normal sense. It felt like something else, like a possession thing, like she wanted him as an object in her mental collection, not as a partner. This started a few weeks ago with something that should have been totally boring. I was putting together a little memory display for Ronan's work recognition thing, not a party at a restaurant, nothing like that. His workplace does this annual recognition inside a small maritime education center that they rent. It is basically a classroom with big windows and model boats and glass cases, and I volunteered to help the organizer because I like busy work when my anxiety spikes. The organizer asked me if I could bring a few photos of Ronan, nothing fancy, just so they could pin them up on a foam board next to a short bio, and I thought, sure, easy, I have a million pictures, I can print a handful. The only catch was my home printer is the kind that behaves like it is doing you a personal favor, so I decided to use the public print kiosk at this county archive building near my job. It is not a store, it is a weird quiet building with old maps on the walls, and they have this little media station where you can print photos and scan documents, mostly used by people making family history albums and small nonprofits making flyers. I went on my lunch break with a thumb drive, I plugged it in, I selected a few photos of Ronan, him holding a certificate, him on a boat deck with a hard hat, him with me at a friend's backyard thing, normal pictures, and the kiosk loaded up this menu that had saved projects from whoever used it last, like a recent history panel, and I almost did not notice because I was focused on my own files. Then I saw his face, not in my files, in the recent projects panel, like a thumbnail grid, Ronan, Ronan again, and my first thought was, oh, the organizer already printed some and left their project on here, which would be weird but not alarming. I tapped it because I was curious, and because I assumed I was about to see a handful of the same photos I had, and the project opened into this massive set of images, dozens and dozens, and my stomach did that drop. It was not just Ronan in group pictures, it was Ronan cropped out of group pictures, it was Ronan zoomed in from the corner of someone's candid, it was Ronan walking from a doorway, Ronan bending over to tie a shoe, Ronan standing at our kitchen counter from behind, which made no sense because who even took that? And then there were screenshots of his professional profile photo, not the official one from his work site, but a screenshot version, like someone saved it off a screen and then saved it again. You could see the little compression blur. I stood there in that silent archive building with my hand on the kiosk edge, and I felt heat rise up my neck, because my brain kept trying to label it as an accident, like maybe a machine glitch, like maybe the kiosk pulled in images from some generic folder, but the images were too specific, and there were so many. The project name at the top had a username, and it was Junie's name, not a random string, Junie's actual first name and last initial, like she had logged in with her email and saved the project, and then forgotten to sign out. I remember looking around like someone was going to appear and tell me I was misunderstanding, but the room was just quiet, an older man at a scanning station, a volunteer sorting paper, nobody paying attention to me having a full-body internal alarm. I clicked out and went back, and there were other saved projects too, and one of them was labeled with my name, which made my skin go cold, because it meant she had been saving pictures of me as well, and that would not have been weird in a normal best friend way except after seeing Ronan's folder. Nothing felt normal. I did not print anything right then. I just yanked my thumb drive out like it was burning me, and I left. I sat in my car, and I realized I was shaking so hard I could not get the key into the ignition on the first try. My first impulse was to call Junie and demand an explanation, but I know myself. I know if she had given me any confident-sounding excuse in that moment I might have swallowed it just to make the anxiety stop. So instead I called Ronan, and I asked him if he had time to talk privately, and the second he heard my voice he got serious. I told him what happened, in a messy rush, the kiosk, the saved project, the number of photos, the cropped zoomed and candid shots, the fact some were taken inside our home, and I kept waiting for him to interrupt and say there is a simple reason, but he went quiet in a way that made me feel worse, because it meant he was also trying to find a simple reason and not finding one. When I got home, Ronan was already there. He had left work early, and he was standing at the kitchen counter with his hands flat on the surface like he was trying to ground himself. He asked me to tell him again slower, and I did, and he asked if I was sure it was Junie's name, and I said yes, because it was not a guess, it was right there. Ronan asked if I took photos of the screen, and I did not, because I panicked and left, and I hated myself for that immediately, because I am normally the person who documents everything, but my brain was in flight mode. I just wanted away from it. Ronan walked through the house like he was checking doors, like he was suddenly seeing our space as permeable, and he asked me which photo looked like it was taken in our kitchen, and I described it, and he went to the spot where it must have been taken and stared at it. Then he looked toward the living room where Junie usually sat when she visited, and I could see the thought forming, that she had been in our house with her phone out while we were turned away, casually collecting. That night we did not sleep much, not because we were yelling or fighting, but because we kept replaying past visits, Junie offering to help tidy up, Junie volunteering to grab something from the bedroom, Junie always angling for pictures at gatherings, Junie taking selfies and insisting Ronan squeeze into the frame, and I kept thinking about how I trusted her with the background of my life. The next day I went back to the archive building, because I needed proof. I needed to know I was not hallucinating, and I brought a coworker with me, not as emotional support, but as a witness. Her name is Sol. She is the compliance person at my job, the kind of person who always has a notebook and never raises her voice. She came with me because I told her I needed a second set of eyes for something potentially serious, and she treats everything serious by default. We got to the kiosk, and thankfully it still had saved projects, because apparently nobody clears them unless the system updates. I opened the recent panel again, and Junie's project was still there, and seeing it again made my hands go numb. This time I did take photos with my phone, not of every image, because there were too many, but I took a photo of the project name and Junie's login identifier. I took a few photos of the thumbnail grid showing the scale of it. I took a photo of the kitchen shot. I took a photo of one that was clearly from a distance at a gathering where Ronan was not posing, just existing, and Sol watched silently the whole time, her mouth tight. When we left, Sol said, very carefully, that this was not normal, and that if Junie escalated into harassment, I should keep records of everything, and she told me not to confront Junie alone somewhere private, not because she thought Junie would get violent, but because people get unpredictable when they are cornered, and she told me to think about what outcome I wanted before I said anything, because once I confronted her, it would not go back to before. I wish I could say I went home and immediately cut Junie off, but I did not, because friendship endings are not clean, and because some part of me kept trying to rescue her, like maybe she had a weird reason, like maybe she was collecting images for some project, like maybe she was making a surprise slideshow, even though the photos were too creepy for that. Junie texted me later that afternoon, casual, asking if we were still on for the weekend, and my hands hovered over the screen, and I felt this angry energy rise up, and instead of replying, I told Ronan we needed to choose a moment to confront her where she could not wriggle out, where we could watch her reaction, where we could end it if we needed to end it. That is when I decided on the dinner invite. Ronan's recognition thing at the Maritime Education Center was coming up, and the organizer had already mentioned a small catered dinner afterward in the same building, just a few staff and spouses, no public crowd, and I had already agreed to help set up the photo board, which meant I could control a small piece of the environment, and I could make sure Junie was there without her suspecting it was a setup. Junie loves being included in anything that feels like an event, especially if she can look supportive and competent, so I invited her to the dinner as my +1, framing it as, Ronan would love you there, it is a big moment, and she responded immediately with enthusiasm, and I felt sick reading her cheerful message while thinking about the folder of Ronan pictures sitting under her login. The days leading up to it were strange, because Junie kept acting normal, sending me ideas for a gift, offering to help me pick an outfit, asking if I wanted her to bring her camera, which made my skin crawl, and I kept replying short and bland so she would not sense the shift. Ronan was quiet too, not angry loud, more like he was simmering under a lid. He kept checking the house windows at night. He kept asking if Junie had a key. She did not, and I was grateful for that. But then I remembered she did not need a key to take pictures inside. She just needed our trust. The evening of the dinner, we arrived early because I had to help set up. The Maritime Center is a long building with a hallway of exhibits, old navigational tools, ship models, a projector screen in the classroom, and a small side area for events. We were not eating at a restaurant table. It was more like a fundraiser-style setup with round tables and folding chairs, and the caterer set trays on a side counter. I hung the foam board photos with the organizer, and I chose safe pictures, the kind that show Ronan as professional and kind. And then, because my hands were shaking, I asked the organizer if we could also run a short slideshow on the projector, just a few images people had emailed in, like a little montage during the dinner, and she agreed because she was busy and it sounded nice. Here is the part one I'm not proud of. I added a final set of images to the slideshow, the photos I took of the kiosk screen, not every creepy close-up, but enough to show Junie's name on the project and Ronan's face repeated again and again. I did not add them as a gotcha joke. I added them because I knew if I confronted Junie privately she would deny and cry and twist, and I would end up questioning myself. But if I put it in front of other people, she would have to either admit or explode, and either way the truth would come out. Junie arrived a little late, full of energy, hugging people she barely knew, complimenting the center, acting like she belonged there. She hugged me and I felt my body stiffen before I could control it, and she asked if Ronan was nervous, and I watched her eyes track him across the room in a way I cannot describe without sounding dramatic, like she was taking inventory. Ronan greeted her politely, but he kept distance, and Junie did not seem to notice. She drifted around talking, laughing, holding her drink, leaning into conversations like she was collecting social proof that she was part of this inner circle. Dinner started, the organizer did a short speech, Ronan got his recognition, people clapped, and I felt proud of him and also furious that this night had been contaminated, and after the initial toast moment, the organizer nodded at me and asked if I had the slideshow ready, and my heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I turned down the lights slightly, I started the slideshow, and at first it was normal, pictures of Ronan at work sites, Ronan smiling with colleagues, Ronan and me at a volunteer event. People did that polite murmuring thing. Then the slideshow flipped to the first kiosk screen image, Junie's name at the top, Ronan's face repeated in thumbnails, and you could feel the air change. It was not a loud gasp moment, it was a slow recognition ripple, people leaning forward, people squinting, someone softly asking what they were looking at, and Junie went very still, like her muscles locked all at once. The slideshow advanced to the next image, the zoomed-in candid, then the kitchen shot, then a screenshot grid that showed just how many there were, and Junie's head turned toward me, not confused, not surprised, but sharp, like she realized I had cornered her in a way she could not talk her way out of. I paused the slideshow, turned the lights up, and I did not do a dramatic speech. I simply asked Junie to explain why she had a saved project full of photos of my husband under her login at the county archive kiosk, and I kept my voice level because I did not want anyone to dismiss me as emotional. Junie tried to laugh, a short brittle sound, and she started gesturing like this was a misunderstanding. She said it was probably some coincidence. She said people reuse logins. She said maybe someone else used her email, and then someone at the table, one of Ronan's co-workers, pointed out that the login name matched her exactly, and Junie's cheeks went red. Ronan did not speak right away, he just watched her, and I think that silence got to her more than anything I could have said, because Junie likes performing for an audience and Ronan was refusing to play a role in her story. Junie shifted tactics. She said she had been putting together a surprise photo gift for me, like a scrapbook, and she said she had been saving pictures whenever she saw a good one, and she tried to make it sound sweet, but the problem with lies is they wobble under their own weight, because the kitchen photo was not a sweet memory. It was taken from behind when Ronan was not posing, and everyone could feel that, even people trying not to take sides. I asked her why she cropped him out of group photos, why she zoomed in on him from across a room, why she saved screenshots of his profile photo, and Junie's mouth tightened, and she glanced around like she was checking which faces looked sympathetic. Then she did something I never expected. She went offended. She acted like I was the one violating her. She said it was creepy that I was digging through her private stuff, and I told her I was not digging through her private stuff. She left her private stuff saved on a public kiosk, and I said it in front of everyone, and I could hear my own voice sounding steadier than I felt. Junie's eyes flicked to Ronan, and she started talking about how Ronan is a public figure in his field, how people admire him, how she just wanted to capture memories of important moments, and one of the staff organizers looked uncomfortable because it was getting personal in a work setting, and I realized I needed to end it fast. I told Junie she took photos inside my home without permission, and Junie immediately denied, but her denial was too fast. like her mouth moved before her brain, and Ronan finally spoke, still calm, and he said he recognized the kitchen angle and the timing, and that she had been in our home the week before, and that he remembered her standing behind him while he was rinsing a cup, and he said he assumed she was texting, and now he knew. Ginny's face did this quick twitch, like she was deciding whether to cry or attack, then she stood up and knocked her chair back. The sound echoed in that classroom, and she accused me of being jealous and insecure. She accused Ronan of making her uncomfortable with his distance lately, which made no sense because he had been distant for only days, and she was scrambling. The organizer stepped in and asked Ginny to lower her voice, and Ginny laughed again, louder this time, and said everyone was making her into some kind of villain because she cared too much, and she started grabbing her coat. I told her, while she was half turned away, that our friendship was over, that she was not welcome in my home, that she should not contact Ronan, and that if she had any photos of him taken without consent she needed to delete them, and Ginny spun back and said she did not take orders from me. Then she walked out of the Maritime Center like she owned the hallway. The rest of the dinner was ruined, obviously. People tried to reset. The organizer apologized to Ronan. Ronan apologized to the organizer. Everyone looked exhausted, and I felt like I had detonated something in public even though Ginny was the one who loaded the explosives. On the drive home, Ronan kept one hand on the steering wheel and one hand clenched on his thigh, and he said, in this quiet voice, that he felt violated, and that word hit me hard, because it made it real in a way that anger does not. When we got home, I checked the house for anything left behind by habit, like my brain was doing safety routines, and I realized Ginny still had a couple items at my place, a sweater she left months ago, a book, a pair of sunglasses, small things that used to feel normal and now felt contaminated, and I shoved them in a bag and put it in a closet, because I could not deal with even touching them. Ginny did not contact me that night, which almost felt worse, because it meant she was planning. She is not the type to leave a narrative uncorrected. She always needs the last word. The next morning I woke up to 3 missed calls from a number I did not recognize, and a voicemail that was Ginny's voice, calm and controlled, telling me she wanted to clear the air, telling me I embarrassed her, telling me she would forgive me if I apologized publicly the way I accused her publicly, and when she said forgive me, something in my chest went cold, because that was the first time I realized she truly believed she could rewrite reality if she said it confidently enough. I did not respond, Ronan did not respond, and that is when the real escalation started. Update 2 weeks later. Ginny did not come back with sadness, she came back with strategy, and it has been the most disorienting part of this whole thing, because I expected grief, I expected rage, I expected her to try to corner me in a conversation, but instead she went straight to managing the story in every circle she could touch. It started small, like a drip. I would get a message from someone I had not spoken to in a while asking if everything was okay, saying they heard there was some misunderstanding at Ronan's event, and the phrasing was always the same, misunderstanding, blown out of proportion, jealousy, and I could tell Ginny was handing people a script. Then one afternoon, Ronan's coworker who had pointed out Ginny's login at the dinner called Ronan and told him Ginny had shown up at their small office building reception and asked to speak with Ronan, like it was normal, like she had a right to his time. Reception refused because visitors have to be cleared, and Ginny apparently stood there for a while smiling like she was waiting for someone to come rescue her from inconvenience. Then she left a sealed envelope with Ronan's name on it. Ronan did not open it. He handed it to the office manager and asked them to keep it in a file in case it mattered later, and he came home looking pale, not scared, more like exhausted by the idea that she could simply appear at his workplace and force him to react. I kept thinking about what Sol told me, keep records, do not confront alone, decide what outcome you want, and the truth is the outcome I wanted was for Ginny to vanish, for her to feel embarrassed enough that she would retreat, but that was never going to happen, because embarrassment requires self-awareness, and Ginny does not live in a world where she can be wrong. A few days later, I got pulled into a meeting at my job with my supervisor and our HR generalist, and they asked me if I knew Ginny, and my heart started pounding, because the only reason your workplace asks if you know someone is because that person has inserted themselves into your professional life. Ginny had filed a complaint through my company's public contact form. She claimed I was using my position to harass her. She claimed I had accessed her private information and threatened her. She claimed I had created a hostile environment for her at a community event, and she framed it like I was unstable, like I had obsessed over her and now I was trying to ruin her. The HR generalist looked uncomfortable reading it, because even she could tell it was dramatic, but they still had to address it because it was written like an official allegation, and for a moment I felt this wave of panic, because I am a rule follower, and having my name tied to a complaint makes my chest tighten. This is where Sol became my anchor in a way I did not expect, because Sol is not my close friend. She is not someone who brings soup when you are sick. She is a colleague who treats policy like a language, and she sat in on the meeting because she had been with me at the kiosk and she could provide factual context. So Elle explained, calmly, that the photos were discovered on a public kiosk due to Ginny leading a saved project. She explained that I did not access Ginny's private device or account. She explained that I documented it for safety reasons after witnessing a large quantity of photos of my husband, including at least one taken inside my home. And she explained that I confronted Ginny in a group setting because I feared a private confrontation would allow denial and escalation, which is exactly what happened anyway. HR asked if I had evidence, and I provided the screen photos from the kiosk, not in a dramatic reveal, just as documentation, and I provided the date and time I took them, and Sol provided her own timestamped photo as a corroboration, because she had taken one too in case mine failed. The HR generalist asked if Ginny was ever an employee. She was not. Asked if she was a client. She was not. Asked if she had any formal connection to my workplace. She did not. And that was when it became clear Ginny was using my company as a tool to intimidate me, because she knew I would panic at anything official. My supervisor, who is normally pretty hands-off, looked angry in a quiet way, and told me that the company would respond formally that Ginny had no relationship to the organization and her complaint did not fall under our internal policies, and that any further contact from her would be routed through legal counsel. And even though I did not want legal language involved, it was a relief to hear someone with institutional weight say, "No, you do not get to use us as your stage." That should have slowed Ginny down, but it seemed to encourage her, like she interpreted any response as proof she mattered. A few days after the HR meeting, the Maritime Education Center organizer called me privately. She sounded uneasy, and she asked if Ginny and I were still friends, and I said no, and she sighed like she had been waiting for permission to say something. Ginny had been contacting the center board, not the same people from Ronan's workplace, but the small volunteer board that oversees the education center. She was insisting the dinner was an unsafe environment. She was claiming Ronan's workplace had allowed harassment. She was demanding an apology for her public humiliation, and she was telling them she had documentation of my misconduct, which was a lie, but a persuasive one if you are a volunteer board trying to avoid drama. The organizer said Ginny also offered to host a photo exhibit fundraiser at the center, featuring local workers and maritime community members, and she framed it as a healing gesture, like she was the injured party offering her talent to bring people together, and the organizer said that offer made her skin crawl after what happened, because it sounded like Ginny wanted access to more people's images, more chances to collect. Ronan and I went to a board meeting at the center, not to plead, not to cry, but to state facts. The board met in a small back room full of stacked chairs and bins of educational supplies, and it felt surreal to be explaining our personal crisis in a room that smelled like cardboard and old brochures. The board chair asked us what happened, and I told it plainly. Ginny's saved kiosk project, the number of photos, the ones taken inside my home, the dinner slideshow, her denial, her exit, her subsequent complaint to my workplace, and Ronan added that Ginny attempted to contact him at his office building, and that he did not consent to any continued contact. The chair asked if we had proof of Ginny's board contacts, and the organizer forwarded a couple emails to the chair, not to me, to avoid turning it into a personal back and forth, and the chair's face tightened while reading, because Ginny's messages were dripping with that polite menace, the kind that sounds reasonable if you do not know the person behind it. The board decided on the spot that Ginny was not to be involved with any event at the center, and that she would not be allowed to attend future workplace recognition dinners, and that if she continued contacting them, they would issue a formal no trespass notice for the building during events. The chair said it without drama, just as a boundary. After the meeting, Ronan and I sat in our car in the center parking area for a long minute, not speaking, and I realized this was what Ginny was doing. She was forcing us to build fences in places that never needed fences before. That night Ronan told me he wanted to change his number, and my first reaction was sadness, because changing your number feels like conceding that your life has been invaded. But then he said something that snapped me into reality. He said he did not want to flinch every time his phone buzzed, and he did not want to wonder if a new contact request was Ginny in a different costume. So we changed his number, and we tightened privacy settings on everything we could think of, not because we were doing anything wrong, but because Ginny had already shown she would treat basic access as permission. A week after that, Ginny escalated into something that made me truly afraid, not in a physical sense, but in a life disruption sense. She mailed printed photos to Ronan's workplace, not an envelope to him directly, but a package addressed to the general office with his name on the attention line, and the office manager called Ronan into her office and showed him what was inside before anyone else handled it, because she did not want gossip, she just wanted it contained. Inside were glossy prints of Ronan, some from public events, some from our home, and on the back of a few were handwritten notes, not romantic notes, not explicit, more like annotations, like someone labeling an exhibit, describing the moment, the lighting, the context, and it read like obsession disguised as artistry. Ronan brought the package home in a sealed bag. He set it on the kitchen table like it was dirty, and his hands were shaking again, and I felt this rage flare in me so hot I had to stand up and walk to the other side of the room to keep my voice calm. I wanted to call Junie and scream, but screaming is still contact, and contact is what she wanted, so instead we documented everything, photos of the package, photos of the postmark, photos of the notes, and we asked Ronan's workplace manager to write down a simple incident log, nothing dramatic, just date, time, what arrived, who opened it, who witnessed it, because I could feel this shifting into a pattern that might need official intervention. Sol told me later, in her calm policy voice, that patterns matter, and I hated how right she was. Junie tried one more move that made my stomach twist. She contacted my aunt, not my mother, not my sister, but my aunt, the one relative who still comments on everything with heart emojis and treats gossip like community news. Junie told her she was worried about me. She implied Ronan was controlling. She implied I was isolated, and she asked my aunt if I had been acting unstable lately. My aunt called me in a panic, and I had to explain the whole thing again, and hearing myself explain it to family made it feel even more humiliating, because now it was not just my private world, it was spreading outward like ink in water. I told my aunt not to engage with Junie, not to share information, not to pass messages, and my aunt promised she would not, but I could hear how upset she was, and I hated Junie for weaponizing concern like that. Ronan and I started discussing what to do next, and neither of us wanted a dramatic legal battle, but Junie was already forcing us into a corner, because if she kept contacting workplaces and boards and relatives, she could damage reputations even if every claim was false, and she seemed determined to keep pushing until someone gave her what she wanted, which I still could not fully define. Then, one evening, I got an email from an address I did not recognize, and it was an RSVP confirmation for a small private photography workshop hosted at a rented studio space, with my name on it, not Junie's, my name, my email, my phone number, and a note that said, excited to learn more about capturing candid intimacy. My skin went cold, because I did not sign up for anything, and I did not give my contact details to any workshop, and I realized Junie was not just trying to collect images, she was trying to attach my identity to her choices, like she wanted to braid our lives together so tightly that I could not pull away without taking her with me. Ronan called the studio from their official contact page and asked if they had my sign-up on file. They did, and the staff member said the registration was paid, and Ronan asked how it was paid, and the staff member said a card ending in digits neither of us recognized, but the confirmation email included a note that the registrant requested permission to bring a guest named Junie. Ronan and I stared at each other across the kitchen table, and I felt something shift from anger to clarity. Junie was building a paper trail. She was creating situations where my name appeared linked to her, so she could later claim closeness, claim consent, claim involvement, and if I confronted her directly she could twist it into, see, she is obsessed with me, she keeps attacking me. That is when we decided we needed outside structure, not to punish her, but to stop the bleeding. We gathered everything, the kiosk screen photos, the dinner witness names from the organizer, the HR complaint documentation, the workplace package incident log, the board meeting statement, the workshop registration email, and Ronan and I went to the civil desk at our county courthouse. It was not dramatic, it was fluorescent lights and tired people holding folders, and a security guard telling everyone to empty their pockets into little gray trays, but I still felt like I was doing something huge, like I was admitting that a friendship had turned into a safety issue, and that is a weird grief all by itself. The clerk at the window did not react emotionally, which I appreciated. She asked what we were filing for, and I said civil harassment restraining order, and my voice shook on the word restraining, because my brain still wanted to call Junie dramatic and intense, not someone you put legal boundaries on. The clerk handed us a packet and pointed us toward the self-help room, and the self-help room was basically folding chairs and a few volunteers who looked like they had seen every version of human chaos. One volunteer listened while I explained the short version, that my former best friend had saved a huge collection of photos of my husband including ones taken inside our home without consent, that she confronted him at his workplace, that she filed a false complaint against me at my workplace, that she mailed unsolicited photo prints and notes to his office, and that she registered for a workshop under my name and tried to attach me to it. The volunteer asked if we had asked her to stop contacting us, and I explained we stopped responding entirely after the dinner, and we had told the Maritime Center board that we did not want her involved in anything, and the board told her to stop contacting them, and my workplace told her to stop contacting them, and Ronan changed his number, and still she kept finding side doors. The volunteer nodded like, yes, this is how these go, and she told me to write it as a timeline of events with dates relative to each other, and to focus on specific actions and witnesses, not feelings, which was hard because my feelings were the loudest part of my body at that moment. Sol met us there, because she said if she was going to be a witness anyway, she wanted to make sure I did not undersell what happened, and Sol sat beside me while I filled out the declaration, correcting me whenever I tried to soften language. She would quietly point at a sentence and tell me to be direct, like she was editing a compliance report, which sounds cold but it kept me steady. We filed for a temporary order first, because the volunteer explained that the court can issue a short-term order based on documentation, then set a hearing date for both sides to appear, and if the judge granted the temporary order, Junie would have to be served and told to stop contacting us immediately. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt weirdly hollow, like I had been holding my breath for weeks and finally let it out, but instead of relief, it was just empty space. 2 days later, the temporary order was granted, not everything we asked for, but enough. No contact. No approaching Ronan at his workplace, no approaching me at my workplace, no third-party contact through relatives, and a specific distance boundary that the judge set based on our addresses and the Maritime Center, and the hearing was scheduled for a few weeks after that. Serving Junie was its own stress, because we did not want to be the ones to hand it to her, and we did not want to send something ourselves, so we used a registered process server, and the process server later confirmed he found her outside her apartment building and served her in person, and he described her as calm at first, then suddenly angry, then suddenly charming again, like she switched masks mid-sentence. I expected the order to scare her, but Junie treated it like a challenge. The next evening, I got a call from the photography studio that ran the workshop she had registered under my name. The staff member sounded nervous. She asked if I was coming to the session, and I told her no, and I told her someone used my name without permission, and the staff member got quiet. Then she said Junie was already there, and she had arrived early, and she was telling people she was my guest. My hand started shaking, and Ronan immediately stood up from the couch like his body already knew this was danger, not physical danger, but narrative danger. Junie trying to occupy my identity in a room full of strangers and then walk away with a clean story. Ronan offered to go with me, but we decided he should not, because he did not need to be in the same space as her unless we had to, and because I did not want Junie to get the satisfaction of seeing him react to her again, so Sol came instead, and Sol drove like she was going to a meeting, calm, controlled, no music, no small talk, just focus. When we got to the studio, it was a converted warehouse-style space, big roll-up door, high ceiling, and the front area had a little desk and a wall of framed sample portraits, and I could hear voices from the back room. The staff member at the desk looked relieved when she saw me, then confused when she saw Sol, and I quietly explained I was not here to attend, I was here to correct a false registration, and I showed her the temporary restraining order on my phone, not shoved in her face, just enough to make it real. The staff member's eyes widened. She stepped out from behind the desk and asked us to wait, then she walked toward the back room. A minute later Junie appeared, and seeing her in that setting made my stomach turn, because she looked so normal, hair neat, bag over her shoulder, smiling like she had arrived for a fun little class, like she had not been mailing glossy prints of my husband to his workplace. Junie's smile held for a second, then her eyes narrowed, and she looked straight at Sol first, not me, like she was measuring who the witness was. I did not give her space to perform. I told her she registered under my name without permission, and I told her she was under a temporary no-contact order, and she needed to leave. Junie did not raise her voice. She leaned into that soft, controlled tone she uses when she wants to sound like a reasonable person in a conflict. She started saying there was a mix-up, that the studio must have autofilled my information because I had been there before, which I had not, and she started saying she only wanted to talk, that she was worried about me, that Ronan was changing me, and I felt this sudden hot wave of anger because she kept trying to make Ronan the villain when the issue was her fixation. The studio manager came out then, a woman with a clipboard who looked exhausted already. She asked Junie to step outside, and Junie tried to refuse, still smiling, still acting like she belonged there, and the manager told her again, firmer, that she needed to leave because she used someone else's identity and there was an active court order involved. Junie's face changed, the smile dropped like a curtain, and she looked at me with this sharp resentment, like I had stolen something from her that she deserved. Then she turned and walked out through the roll-up door without another word. The manager asked if we wanted her to call police, and I said not unless Junie refused to leave the property, because I did not want a scene, I wanted documentation and distance, and the manager nodded and asked us to email a copy of the order, and I told her I could bring a printed copy instead, because I did not want anything else floating around in inboxes, and she agreed and gave me her office address and said she would make an internal incident report either way. In the car, Sol told me Junie was trying to bait me into a confrontation she could record or twist, and she told me I did the right thing by keeping it short and letting the studio manager be the authority, and hearing that from Sol felt like being handed a solid bar to hold on to. 2 nights after that, Junie violated the order in the most cowardly way possible, not by contacting me directly, but by approaching Gareth, Ronan's older colleague who runs safety trainings at the dock operations facility where Ronan occasionally consults, Gareth is not family, he is not friend, he is a stern older man who dislikes drama so much he barely even attends holiday parties. Junie showed up at the facility front office during a public training check-in window and asked Gareth to pass along a message to Ronan. The receptionist later described it as polite, smiling, very confident, and Gareth, bless him, asked to see the restraining order details because Ronan had mentioned it briefly. Then Gareth told her he would not pass messages and she needed to leave, and Junie tried to argue, and Gareth told the receptionist to call security. That incident mattered, because it was no longer vague, it was a clear violation with neutral witnesses, and Gareth wrote a short statement and gave it to Ronan, and Ronan's workplace security added Junie's name to their visitor ban list. By the time the hearing date rolled around, I felt like I had aged months in a few weeks, not because I was afraid every second, but because my nervous system never fully relaxed. Every unexpected number felt suspicious, every unfamiliar car outside my job made my stomach tighten, and I hated that Junie had turned me into that version of myself. The night before the hearing, Junie posted a public portfolio update on her photography page, not directly naming us, but featuring a set of candid workplace-style images of Ronan from public events, and the caption was about admiring dedication and steady hands and quiet leadership, and it was written like praise, but it felt like ownership, like she was announcing she had a claim. We documented it, screenshot with timestamps, and then we went to court the next day with a folder thick enough that I felt embarrassed holding it, like I was carrying proof of how badly someone could cross a boundary and keep smiling while they did it. Final update 2 months later. The hearing did not feel like justice, it felt like a procedure, and that is not me complaining, it is just the reality. You walk through metal detectors, you sit on a hard bench, you watch other people's lives get summarized in 5 minutes chunks, and then someone calls your name and you stand up and try to compress weeks of anxiety into words that sound reasonable. Junie arrived early, of course, because she always arrives early when she is trying to control a room. She wore an outfit that looked carefully chosen to read as harmless and professional, and she sat with her posture perfect and her hands folded like she was waiting for a job interview. She did not look at me directly at first, she watched Ronan instead, and Ronan did not react. He stared at the wall ahead like he had decided she was not worthy of eye contact anymore, and I felt this strange wave of pride for him, because it was not dramatic, it was just firm. Junie had a representative with her, not a lawyer in a full suit, more like a legal aid advocate, someone who helps people understand court process, and I appreciated that in a weird way because it meant Junie could not pretend she was confused about what the order meant. I had Sol with me, because Sol was my witness for the kiosk discovery, and Ronan had his office manager, because she was the witness for the package and the front desk incident, and the Maritime Center organizer also agreed to show up with a short statement about the dinner and Junie's follow-up pressure campaign, which still blows my mind, because I never expected my life to intersect with that many official-sounding witnesses over a friendship breakup. When we were called, the judge asked me to speak first, and I kept it factual: the kiosk, the saved project under Junie's name, the quantity and type of photos, the ones taken inside my home, the dinner confrontation and her denial, then her actions after, workplace appearance, false complaint to my workplace, mailed photo package, registration under my name, and then the violations after the temporary order, the studio incident and the dock training facility incident through Gareth. The judge asked if I had copies, and I handed up what we had: printed photos of the kiosk screen with the project name visible, screenshots of the workshop registration under my name, the workplace incident log, the studio manager's incident note, Gareth's written statement, and the Maritime organizer's statement about Junie's messages to the board. Junie's turn was almost surreal, because she did not deny the photos, not fully, she reframed them, she claimed she is an artist, she claimed she documents community leaders, she claimed Ronan is a visible figure in that local industry, she claimed she was collecting images to celebrate his career, and she tried to make it sound like I had turned admiration into malice. The judge asked her about the kitchen photo, and Junie hesitated, then said she did not remember taking it, and the judge asked if she had ever taken photos inside my home without permission, and Junie tried to answer indirectly, saying she takes candid images and people often forget, and the judge cut her off and asked again, and Junie finally said she might have taken a candid shot without thinking, because she is always looking for good light and natural moments. Hearing Junie describe my home as a place to harvest natural moments made my stomach twist, because it confirmed what I had felt from the beginning. She did not see us as people, she saw us as material. Then the judge asked her why she registered for a workshop under my name, and Junie's story shifted again. She claimed she was trying to surprise me, that she thought signing me up would be a gift, that she meant to tell me later, and the judge asked why she added herself as a guest, and Junie said she wanted to go together, because that is what friends do, and the judge asked why she did it after being told the friendship was over, and Junie's face tightened. The judge asked about the no-contact order, specifically whether Ginny understood she was not supposed to approach Ronan's workplace or use third parties to pass messages, and Ginny said she understood, then claimed she did not approach Ronan, she approached Gareth, and the judge's expression went flat, and she explained that using a third party is still contact, and Ginny's advocate beside her looked like she wanted to disappear into the bench. Ronan spoke briefly when the judge asked if he wanted to add anything. He kept it short. He stated he did not consent to Ginny photographing him in private spaces. He stated her workplace contact and mailed package made him feel unsafe at work, and he stated he wanted the order to remain in place because she had not stopped even after being served, and his voice stayed steady the entire time. The judge then asked Ginny one final question, whether she would agree, on the record, to stop photographing Ronan, stop possessing and distributing images of him taken without permission, stop using my name for registrations or accounts, and stop contacting either of us in any way, including through third parties. Ginny paused, and I could see the calculation happening, because agreeing would mean surrendering the control she was addicted to, and the judge waited her out, silent, patient. Ginny finally said she would agree to stop contacting, but she refused to promise she would stop photographing Ronan at public events, because she claimed she had a right as an artist. That refusal was the moment the judge decided, you could see it, because the judge's eyes hardened, and she explained that being in public does not give someone the right to target an individual repeatedly, and that Ginny's pattern showed fixation, not incidental photography. The judge granted a longer-term restraining order. She included no contact, no third-party contact, a stay-away distance from our workplaces and the Maritime Education Center, and a specific prohibition against Ginny using my name or personal information for any registration or account creation, and she also included a requirement that Ginny remove and destroy any images of Ronan taken inside our home or in non-public contexts, and she set a compliance review date where Ginny would have to sign a declaration under penalty of perjury that she complied. Ginny did not cry, she did not scream, she went very still, and her jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch, and for a second I thought she might lash out right there, but she did not. She stood up when told, gathered her bag, and walked out quickly with her advocate trying to keep up. Outside the courtroom, Ginny did one last thing that made it clear the order was necessary. She waited near the exit hallway like she was hoping to force eye contact, like she needed a final moment of acknowledgement, and Ronan walked straight past without looking, and I did the same, and Sol stayed close to me like a quiet wall. 2 weeks after the hearing, the compliance part got real, because Ginny tried to pretend she could comply without actually giving anything up. She submitted a declaration that she deleted everything, and then the Maritime Center organizer called Ronan and told him Ginny had attempted to submit a photo series for an upcoming community exhibit at a different venue, featuring, among other people, Ronan, and the organizer recognized him immediately and refused it. That exhibit submission became the proof that Ginny was still circulating his image as a subject, and Ronan's office manager added her own note, because the package that arrived earlier had included a set of prints that matched the same series style, and it showed Ginny had a consistent project, not a one-off mistake. We brought that to the court at the compliance review, not with a dramatic speech, just documentation, and the judge did not extend the order further at that moment because it was already active, but she issued a written warning that any further distribution of non-consent images could lead to contempt consequences, and that warning finally seemed to land. After that, Ginny stopped, not because she suddenly grew a conscience, but because she ran out of safe places to push without consequences. The Maritime Education Center kept her barred, Ronan's workplace kept her barred, my workplace kept her blocked, and the studio had her flagged as not permitted on site. The last loose end was the stuff she left at my house, that sweater and book and sunglasses, and I did not want to mail anything. I did not want to meet her. I did not want to hand her one more moment she could twist, so I asked the courthouse self-help volunteer what people do in that situation, and they suggested a neutral property drop through a third party. So Sol took the bag, drove it to the courthouse lobby during business hours, handed it to the civil desk clerk with Ginny's name on it and the case number, and the clerk logged it as property exchange, and Sol texted me only that it was done, no extra commentary, no emotion, just closure handled like paperwork. A few days later I got a confirmation from the studio manager that Ginny's registration under my name was voided and removed from their system, and Ronan's office manager confirmed there had been no further attempts to contact him, and the Maritime organizer confirmed Ginny had stopped emailing the board entirely. The friendship ended at that dinner, but the final ending, the kind that actually sticks, happened in a courtroom hallway where Ginny did not get a scene, she did not get a goodbye, she just got a boundary she could not talk her way through.